Hey, welcome everybody. Great to have you all joining in with me. We're going to have a good time tonight. We're going to be doing a prophecy update. And just a couple of things real quick. I noticed people commenting on YouTube and on the app about the jacket I was wearing with Billy Crone. So people saying, oh, it's like Las Vegas, just like Billy. So what happened? That was at the San Marcos conference. Billy Crone decided to send me some jackets to wear. Billy's got that swag. And anyways, he dared me. He dared me to wear one of them. He sent me 4. And he dared me to wear one. So I wore it there. So some of y'all saw that in that picture. And I had a lot of fun. Billy's a great guy. And great to have all of you join me. And we're going to get into this in just a second. And real quick, I've seen some comments the other day. I was doing a Q&A, and a couple people had asked if I had seen the Revelation chapter 13 that was taught by Ken at 412 Church in Temecula Valley, and about America, because I was talking about America not being in Bible prophecy, and Ken, he teaches America will be in Bible prophecy, or is in Bible prophecy, and he goes into it. And actually had a conversation with him just a little while ago, and it was a great conversation. Maybe sometime I can have Ken on here. We can go back. We can do a little thing back and forth because we don't agree on what we see, but he's interesting. He brings up some good points. I'm always interested to listen and have differences. It's good to have differences as long as they aren't differences regarding who Jesus is, the essentials of the faith, the Trinity, who Jesus is, how we are saved. But if it's differences in certain things regarding Bible prophecy, the rapture, the timing of the rapture, in his case with Ken, what is America? Is America in Bible prophecy? I say no. He says yes. Anyways, so we'll see if I can get Ken on here sometime. Probably will be able to. Okay. Let's get going. We're going to be doing a prophecy update. I'm going to pray, Lord, I thank you for the opportunity right now. I ask for your ministering. Help me to have clarity of thought and speech. And pray for your ministering to everybody that's watching this. We'll watch later. And as we connect the dots, in Jesus' name, amen. All right, folks, we live in some very interesting times. I'm going to show you a short video here. It's about 3 minutes long. And it's regarding what's going on with Saudi Arabia and Israel. And the prophecy update, we're going to be looking at Israel. I mean, you have situations in Iran. We have this desire to build the temple. We have the red heifers. We have some just absolutely amazing things that are all taking place at the same time. I believe that Israel is the bullseye, especially Jerusalem, the bullseye for all end-time Bible prophecies to be fulfilled. So we're going to look at Scripture, going to connect a lot of dots with you guys. And listen, we look and go, wow. I believe that the generation that sees all of the events that Jesus spoke about, including the nation of Israel, the Jews being gathered back in the land together, when all these things are taking place at the same time, a convergence of all these things, that's the time when you need to look up and lift up your head because your redemption draws near. And indeed, we are watching all of these things converge right now, folks. I believe our redemption draws near. Listen, before we get going with the rest of this, if you would, I would ask you to please subscribe to this channel, whether you're on the app or you are on YouTube. Subscribe, also like and share. It really helps us with algorithms to get the messages out there. And it's free to do those things. But with that, I'm going to roll this video. It's about 3 minutes long. Listen to what's said there. Then we're going to come back here and we're going to kick off connecting the dots.
Continuing to follow that breaking news right now on what could be a historic step towards peace in the Middle East. We brought you this earlier in the show, but now we're getting some new information.
The U.S. and Saudi Arabia have agreed on a tentative deal for Saudi Arabia to officially recognize Israel. Newsmax correspondent Daniel Cohen live in Tel Aviv with details. Daniel.
Yeah, good morning, Sean. Good morning, Emma. Historic, enormous, huge, right? And all of those words are apropos to describe what we're talking about here. Let me just set the table for you in case you're just catching up, okay? The U.S. and Saudi Arabia have agreed on the broad contours of a deal for Saudi Arabia to recognize Israel in exchange for concession to the Palestinians. Also, Saudi Arabia wants U.S. security guarantees, and I think this is the bigger thing for them, help with their civilian nuclear program. Now, that is according to U.S. officials who were quoted off the record. And as you said, and you set this up the right way, a lot of this is not a done deal yet. In fact, the White House, we're hearing off the record expressing cautious optimism that something can be done in the next 9 to 12 months. But they have gone from hammering out larger details to some of the finer details. Listen, I've heard people here in Israel, people I respect and admire, that know Middle East foreign policy way more than I do, call it the mother of all Middle East peace deals. The Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, a man in his late 30s, the de facto ruler of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. He's been meeting in Jeddah for the last few weeks, in fact, months, with Jake Sullivan, President Biden's national security advisor, trying to get these talks moving. So now we're hearing they're talking specifics. So the significant concession from Israel would be help promoting the creation of a Palestinian state. That's what they're saying. I have to tell you, I am not hearing that at all here in Israel. In return, the United States would be pressing Saudi Arabia to impose limits on its growing relationship with China. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu, I've been checking his Twitter. I've been checking anything. He hasn't said anything publicly yet. But since I've been here in Israel and recovering this for you here in Newsmax, he has said publicly there is no way that he will give up an inch of sovereign Israeli soil to create a Palestinian state. He has said he's willing to make moderate or light concessions. What does that mean? I don't know, but that's antithetical to the ultra-Orthodox that serve in the Knesset right now, ministers to Bibi's right, who say openly that they don't want to create a Palestinian state. They want to take land back from the Palestinians, including the Temple Mount. So this is very big news. We're still waiting to see specific details, but if there's a deal in principle between the United States brokering, obviously this is huge. And on the heels of the Abraham Accords, probably the highest accomplishment of President Trump, because it brought peace between Israel, Bahrain, the UAE, Morocco, and Sudan. Some people said if President Trump would have won a second term, or if he was still president, that this Saudi deal would have already been done. That's neither here nor there. But President Biden clearly riding some of the momentum, some of the I guess, greasing the skids, maybe a better term, but of the Abraham Accords and all the success that we've seen in trade and business there, economic partnership. But a deal with Saudi Arabia, recognizing Israel and bringing some sort of peace here, is enormous. Sean, Emma, back to you.
Wow. So, I mean, you look at that and think, folks, let's just run through some of the things that we are watching that all involve Israel right now. So we have the story of the red heifers, which I'm going to get to. We have this push to build the temple. We have regarding the building the temple, we'll get into that with the Temple Institute and all of the instruments that are necessary for the sacrifices and offerings. We have this, what you just watched here, the Saudi peace plan. We have U.S., we have Saudi Arabia, we have Israel. We have the Iran issue that is only escalating. We have the possibility, Psalm 83 war, and then after that, Ezekiel 38 battle. I mean, we look at all of these things. Then we have a very interesting dynamic that's taking place right now. Regarding Israel, you have the judicial reform issue, but what's coming out of Israel or in Israel is within certain groups is an I hesitate to say anti-Christian movement. I would say it's definitely anti-Messianic Jew. So, for example, if you're going over to Israel right now, you're a believer in Christ, you aren't going to experience this. But if you're a Messianic Jew, you're a Jewish person, you believe in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, there is an enormous increase in pressure against the Messianic community, and there's a real deep concern, hey, it could turn physical violence against Messianic Jews coming from certain Jewish groups, not all Jews, obviously. But certain sects of religious Judaism. And so we're watching these things develop. And then, of course, we have Hamas and Hezbollah. So you have all of these different dynamics taking place all at the same time. I want you to think of this before we continue any further, is these things are all centering on Israel. And they all have a dynamic that plays into the last days. Now, I'm going to read a real familiar passage to you, but we're going to go through a lot of other things here in just a minute. And I want you to get caught up on things that most of the times in Bible prophecy we don't get caught up on, but it's in Daniel chapter 9. And Daniel, he's praying, hey, I want to understand the vision that I have. So Daniel's told at the beginning, Daniel chapter 9, verse 23, at the beginning of your supplications, Daniel, the command went out, and I have come to tell you, for you are greatly beloved. Therefore, consider the matter and understand your vision. Understand the vision that you have, Daniel. I'm sent here by the Lord. I'm going to give you what this vision is that you had. And then the angel tells him, 70 weeks are determined for your people and for your holy city. Okay, stop. I know you guys know this already, but stop and think about this. Your people, your holy city. What's that? It's the people would be the Jewish people. Your holy city, what would that be? That's Jerusalem. So we have an identifier there. What for? Look at this. To finish the transgression, Daniel 9, verse 24, make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, bring in everlasting righteousness. Wow. So the Lord is telling us, hey, the entire 70-week prophecy must be fulfilled. It's Bible prophecy must be fulfilled regarding the nation of Israel and the people of Israel, in order to bring an end to sin, to bring in everlasting righteousness. Wow. It must happen. Then it goes on and says this, verse 24, to seal up vision and prophecy. Wait a minute. In other words, to complete, to seal up vision and prophecy, to complete all prophecy. It's got to all be fulfilled. 70 weeks are determined for your people. There must be a fulfillment of the 70th week of Daniel. It will focus on his people, the Jews, and his holy city. And we're told that right here. And to anoint the most holy. What's that, to anoint the most holy? Yeshua HaMashiach. Jesus is coming back. He's going to rule and reign. And he's going to rule and reign from Jerusalem. There will be Jews here. The city of Jerusalem will always be here. In fact, there's going to be, at the end of the millennial kingdom, there will be a new Jerusalem that's going to descend out of the sky. But this is what Daniel is being told, right? Then you go the next few verses. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem, when did that happen? Nehemiah, right? Nehemiah is told, he's given the green light by the king. Hey, go back to your land to restore and build Jerusalem. That's what he says here. From the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem, until the Messiah Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. How many is that? That's 69 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall. That's even in troublesome times. When did that take place? That's Nehemiah. Remember, he goes to build the wall. It's troublesome times, and his desire is that the Jews would be able to worship the Lord in peace. At the time of Nehemiah, and they go there before the wall, and they would face all kinds of persecution, even physical. So they got to have this protection. So the first 69 weeks, they begin. The entire countdown begins at the time of Nehemiah when he goes to build the wall. Okay. And after the 62 weeks, in other words, the 7 plus 62, after the 69 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. Well, wait a minute. What's that? After the 69 weeks, that'd be 60. Each week is a 7-year period. So 69 times 7. How long is that? 483 years. After 483 years, by the Babylonian calendar, 360 days, it was exactly 360 days times 483 years from the time of Nehemiah, the command to restore and build Jerusalem and to build the wall. It was exactly 483 years to the time when Jesus came to this earth and he went to the cross. Notice it says here, and he be cut off, not for himself. Wow. Who is the Messiah cut off? In fact, it's so clear. Verse 26, the Messiah would be cut off, but not for himself. Who was he cut off for? For anyone who would believe in him would not perish but have everlasting life. Very interesting, isn't it, folks? So you can tell from this, listen, if you're a Jewish person living at the time when Jesus came, you could take Daniel's prophecy in Daniel chapter 9 and count the 69 weeks, the 483 years, and realize those Nehemiah, 483 years, came to build Jerusalem and the wall. We know the Messiah should be coming just about now. Anybody looking at the prophecies would know it's the time of the Messiah. That's why Jesus chastised the religious leaders. They didn't care about the Messiah. You read about it in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 16. You guys should have known the time of the season. You guys know the Bible. But you choose to not, you willfully chose to be ignorant of my first coming, right? Okay, so we got that. But they should have known about right now the Messiah should show up. Okay, then there's another identifier in here for the last seven, the 70th week, the last 7 years. After the Messiah is cut off, and the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, the end of it shall be with the flood, until the end of the war desolations are determined. Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. Stop. So the war, that's talking about the Messiah. After the Messiah is cut off, then the prince who is to come, he's going to come from the people who destroyed the city, the war and everything. That's 70 AD when the Romans came in. They destroyed the city. Okay, that happened. What happens next? It says here, then the prince of the people who destroyed the city, he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, the 70th week of Daniel, the final 7 years. So we know there's a 7-year period, all right? But in the middle of the week, in the middle of the 7-year period, in the middle of the week, he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of abomination shall be one who makes desolate. All right, there's a lot in here, but let's start connecting some things here. So we know there's a 70th week, a final 7-year period. Antichrist is going to break that 7-year covenant. Again, it tells us here, he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. In the middle of the week, he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. Folks, this whole thing is an identifier for the Jews. It's an identifier for Israel. And specifically, it's an identifier for sacrifice and offering in Jerusalem that will take place. As it was when Jesus first came, 69 weeks, 483 years from the time of Nehemiah until he came, if a person was paying attention to the Bible, the religious leaders should have known. They read the Bible. They knew it. They choose to ignore his first coming. They would have known the Messiah should come just about now. They ignored it. Folks, the same thing is happening right now. The religious leaders are ignoring all of the signs of the second coming of Christ. We can look, and I'm not saying it's going to happen next week. I'm not saying it's going to happen next month or even next year. But folks, we live in this very interesting season. It's a dynamic that this world's never experienced before. We see everything converging at the same time. Israel's a nation again, 1948. That had to take place. Jews having Jerusalem, 1967. That had to take place in order for prophecy to be fulfilled. And then you start narrowing it down, well, there must be sacrifices and offerings. And we know the abomination of desolation spoken of here in Daniel chapter 9 is regarding Antichrist, because Daniel 9 identifies it that way, but also in Matthew chapter 24, verse 15, Jesus specifically says the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. When you see him standing in the holy place, that is the abomination. Antichrist standing in the holy place. And then everyone in Judea shall flee. That marks the second half of the tribulation period. When Antichrist stands in the temple demanding to be worshiped as God, folks, it is coming. There is going to be a temple that is going to be built. And there are going to be sacrifices. All right, let's start working through several things here. Right now, we know, we've heard about the red heifers, right? We just saw the video with the Saudi peace plan. We're going to get to that towards the end, coming back to that. We hear about the red heifers. There's currently 5 red heifers. From everything I understand, 4 of them are still, the red heifers, Numbers chapter 19, a passage some of you are probably familiar with, some of you might not be. But this is what Numbers chapter 19 says about the red heifer. And this is why people get excited about it. But listen to this, Numbers chapter 19, beginning in verse 1. Now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, this is the ordinance of the law which the Lord has commanded, saying, speak to the children of Israel that they may bring you a red heifer without blemish, in which there is no defect, and on which a yoke has never come. You shall give it to Eleazar the priest, that he may take it outside the camp, and it shall be slaughtered before him. So you'll see, people, there you see the picture of the red heifer. So you start looking, going, okay, outside the camp. This is why people believe it was on the Mount of Olives that the red heifer was originally sacrificed. But continuing, and it shall be slaughtered before him. By the way, it's really a picture of Christ. Outside the camp, where was Jesus sacrificed? Outside the city. Red heifers also. I mean, so many interesting things here that point to Christ. Remember, all the sacrifices, all the feast days, they were a shadow, but the substance was Christ, right? Passover, everything pointed to Christ. Continues. Eleazar the priest shall take some of the blood of the red heifer with his finger, sprinkle some of its blood 7 times directly in front of the tabernacle meeting. What's the number of 7? 7 is the number of completion. The blood is a reminder, without the shedding of blood, there's no forgiveness of sin, right? All this points to Jesus. Our salvation is complete, right? Everything here. Then the heifer shall be burned in his sight. Its hide, its flesh, its blood, and its offal shall be burned. And the priest shall take the cedar wood and hyssop and scarlet. Wow. Another picture of Christ, even in the sacrifice of the red heifer. The cedar wood, the hyssop, the scarlet, blood, right? The hyssop. What was it with Jesus? They put the vinegar on the hyssop and put it up to his lips to drink. Remember that? The cross, the cedar wood, picture of the cross. You look at all of it and cast the cedar wood, the hyssop, and the scarlet. Where? Into the midst of the fire burning the heifer. So while the heifer is being burnt, you take the wood, you take the hyssop, you take everything. You throw it the scarlet. And then the priest shall wash his clothes, he shall bathe in water, and afterward he shall come into the camp. The priest shall be unclean until evening. And the one who burns it shall wash his clothes in water, bathe in water, and shall be unclean until evening. Then a man who is clean shall gather up the ashes of the heifer and store them outside the camp in a clean place, and they shall be kept for the congregation of the children of Israel for the water of purification. It is for purifying from sin. All right, so you look at all of this, and I'm not going to make too much of a big deal about the red heifer because I have some opinions on it, and I'll share them with you in a minute. Don't want to hurt your feelings, but I'll share them with you. But you look at it, and you look at everything taking place right now. The red heifer, this is coming from Moses. What's supposed to happen? The red heifer, the ashes of the red heifer are necessary for purifying the whole ceremonial purification process, so the priests could rightly sacrifice and bring an offering to the Lord. Okay, now that all stopped when Daniel chapter 9, Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans, 70 AD. We just read about that. Okay, when the 70th week starts up again, here's the reason I'm bringing up the red heifer. It's all over the prophecy news. 5 of them now, 4, one of them looks like it's probably close to being disqualified. There's still 4 that are good. I did some more research, talked to Mondo the other day about that. Okay, so with the red heifers, why bring up the red heifers? Because in Daniel chapter 9, understand this, Daniel chapter 9 is clear. There will be sacrifices and offerings that are taking place again in Israel at the area of the temple, I believe on the Temple Mount. Check it out, Daniel chapter 9, what Antichrist at the midpoint brings an end. He stops it. He seems to break his agreement. It alludes to this possibility that Antichrist, the covenant with the many of Daniel chapter 9. It's about the Jews. They're at the center of it. The way Daniel chapter 9 reads is it alludes to this possibility that part of the covenant is, okay, you guys can start your sacrifices again. So when I look at the subject of the red heifer, I don't get excited about the red heifers myself. But I get excited because they point to the Lord Jesus Christ. Ultimately, in their sacrifice anyways, the whole thing points to Jesus Christ. But when you look at it now, knowing that the offerings are going to come again, I remember this. I remember Jesus is coming. Therefore, I get excited. But what I don't get excited about, I don't get excited about the pain and suffering that's going to come through the nation of Israel. I don't get excited about that, the temple being built, because I know Antichrist is going to stand in that temple, and he's going to demand to be worshiped as God. And then he's going to turn his attention to persecute the Jews. So I'm not someone that personally is going to support the red heifers. I'm not someone personally that's going to give money to supporting building the temple. Listen, I've been to the Temple Institute many times. I've been there. I mean, on the one hand, it's exciting when you look, you go, okay, they have all the utensils that are necessary to bring in the offerings and sacrifices, to start up the ceremonial process again. You have the priestly robes. They're training priests. I look at that and I go, wow, this is so cool. However, it's not. What we see is prophecy coming together, but we got to understand this when it comes to prophecy coming together. A lot of it is very painful, especially painful for Israel. God's going to judge the sin of this world. So you look at, am I excited that Israel's a nation again, 1948? Absolutely. Am I excited they have Jerusalem again, 1967? Absolutely. But ultimately, I've got to remember, I must remember what the end outcome is. It's Daniel chapter 9. 70 weeks are determined for your people, for your holy city, to bring an end to sin, an end to transgression, an end to iniquity, bring in all righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and anoint the most holy. So I must look past the temple, past the red heifer, past the things that are going, you and I are going to witness these things develop at, I believe, a really fast pace from now on. We've already been watching them. I think it's only going to increase. But we've got to remember they point to Jesus. We've got to remember that we have the gospel message that people need to hear. They need to know about that. Listen, in 1994, it didn't look like Israel's going to ever be able to have a temple since 1994. They entered into agreement with Jordan. You have the running of the Temple Mount, the peace plan with Jordan. You have all these things. In 1994, because of that agreement with Jordan, it looks like when you look at the Temple Mount, Israel will never have a temple on the Temple Mount. You have other problems there. You have a gold dome there. Could the temple be placed next to the gold dome? Absolutely. In fact, I've been underneath the Western Wall and seen a model with the temple being placed side by side with the gold dome. In fact, if you guys could find a picture of the dome on the Temple Mount, I'll show it to everybody. I'll walk them through that, if you could pull it up. So you have the temple, you have the gold dome that's there. You have, I personally believe that the rock underneath the dome of the rock, that's what the gold dome is called, is the place where the Holy of Holies was. But I could be wrong. I totally admit I could be wrong. It could be where the gazebo is, as known as the Dome of the Tablets, hence the Ark of the Covenant, and the Dome of the Spirit, which would be, what do you think of, the Holy Spirit? Also where the gazebo is, which would allow the temple to be built next to the gold dome. If you stand there and you look directly east, you are actually facing the eastern gate. So there is some validity to the argument that the temple, okay, there you see the gold dome. Okay, just to the right of what you are looking at, the gazebo you see right there, that's not the gazebo I'm talking about. There's one that's further over. It's out of this picture, but it gives you a really good idea. It's to the right of that. Wait, I take that back. I see this different angle. It's actually, it looks like this picture is taken from about where the Dome of the Tablets is. Wow, that's cool. Okay, so if you look at the gold dome right where it is, picture the temple being built where you're standing and that whole platform area between there and the gold dome. Hence, what could you have a fulfillment of that as you're looking at that picture? You could have the fulfillment of Revelation chapter 11, where the Jews are able to build the temple, but the outside the temple court is given over to the Gentiles. So it totally fits there. I've believed for the longest time the temple will be where the gold dome is. But listen, I'm not going to be dogmatic about it, and I do realize I could definitely be wrong. That dome, or that temple, could be where the Dome of the Spirits is, and it lines up with the Eastern Gate. But here's the reason I bring this up is because it's absolutely fascinating how pressure is increasing from religious groups to perform all the Judaism, again, the sacrifices and offerings, the red heifer, we want to build the temple, all that. And then at the same time, this movement that's increasing in Israel to come against the Messianic Jews. In other words, don't talk about Yeshua. Don't talk about Jesus. Now, I've had some people say, hey, Pastor Tom, shouldn't we be boycotting Israel right now because of this concept that they're going to shut down the Christian message from being there? Listen, it's kind of always been that way in Israel, where you're not supposed to proselytize. But I don't worry about that. Try going to a Muslim nation and proselytize. See how that goes. Try going to Los Angeles and proselytize. They'll run you out of the city of Los Angeles, right? I mean, just because. If you find out in Israel, it's pretty much everywhere you go, people are walking around with Bibles, and it's great, especially when you're in Jerusalem. So cool. And you find out there really is a freedom, especially from someone like us, to go around talking about Jesus. If they find out that you're a Jew and a believer, the pressure is going to increase against you. But what's happening, they're talking with my friends in Israel, they're saying, man, the pressure is increasing against us who are believers in the Lord Jesus Christ, who are Jewish, who live in the land of Israel. I know some people that have been arrested over there for it. But boycott Israel? Absolutely. That's the opposite. What we should be doing is saying, hey, man, this is one of the reasons I get to go to Israel. I get to support what's going on I get to support this concept that God has given Israel, the land of Israel, to the Jews. You go back to the land covenant. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, God made a covenant with them for the land. You look at the Davidic covenant. You look at the Messianic covenant. You look at these things and you realize, wait a minute, the reason I support Israel is because God's a Zionist. God is the original Zionist. You want to know who the greatest Zionist is in the entire universe? It's the Lord. It's Yeshua. He is the Zionist. And I'm a Christian Zionist because I understand the covenant that God has made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and the Jewish people. I understand the Old Testament and the New Testament are both Jewish books. And I'm going to continue to be on God's side when it comes to the nation of Israel and the Jewish people. And I know that Jesus is coming back and he's going to rule and reign from Jerusalem. So I get excited about these things. To boycott Israel, to me, is the last thing I would ever want to do. Might as well enter into the boycott, divest, and sanction things that are going on against Israel with products that come out of Israel. It's just nuts. Why would I want to do something like that? I'm not someone that's going to go down that path and realize when I go to Israel, I still have an opportunity to share Jesus with other people. I do it all the time. People on our trips, they do it all the time. You find out how open everybody is. But there's a small group that it is increasing, and they're very vocal, and they're increasing against the Messianic Jews. So we see this oppression that's increasing. Everything is racing. You got the red heifers, right? You have the temple talk itself. You have the increase of pressure against the Messianic Jews. But you go back to the first century, what was it? The people who were ignorant, who were willfully ignorant of the first coming of Christ. What do we have right now? We have the religious leaders in Christianity and in Judaism that are willfully ignorant of the second coming of Christ. In fact, I think you see it more in Christianity. 2 Peter chapter 3. Where's the promise of his coming? Our fathers used to tell us Jesus was coming again, but for this they are willfully ignorant. They choose to not pay attention to the scriptures even if they know the scriptures say that Jesus is coming again. But you look at all of this, including the pressure coming against the Messianic Jews. Hey, by the way, real quick, listen, our Texas conference is coming up, and you can join us via live stream. John Holler's going to be with us, J.B. Hickson, Olivier Melnick, Bill Feder, Dr. Andy Woods, Alex Newman, and myself. It's going to be a great time there coming up in Texas. Can't wait to see all you guys in Texas, man. That's going to be really cool. First time Hope for Our Times conference coming up in Texas. All right, I'm going to go through this too. I mean, you start looking at all these different dynamics that are taking place. Again, I'll come to the Saudi peace plan by the time we get to the end. I want you to think of this. So last Saturday, Shabbat, last week, a week ago yesterday, I was invited with my wife and a couple of other people to go to an area in Los Angeles. I think I briefly have mentioned this during the week in Beverly Hills and near the Fairfax district, Orthodox Jewish area, because of video that we had made. Many of you saw it and liked it and shared it. Hey, if you haven't seen it, I had interviewed the children of Holocaust survivors while we were in Jerusalem, and they wanted to know why. They loved it. They shared it. In fact, one of the rabbis shared the video with this entire congregation. So we go to their house there in Israel. In Beverly Hills. It was a great time. 5 rabbis were there. A couple of other pretty important people were there. And it was a 4-hour lunch. Just absolutely loved it. Singing the Psalms of Ascent in Hebrew. I wasn't singing in Hebrew, but all of them were. It was absolutely wonderful. Singing out of Deuteronomy, singing out of Exodus. Let me tell you, it was a really, really joyful experience. And the rabbis talked, and then everybody talked about 3 minutes, and then it was after a while they said, "Hey, Pastor Tom, can you talk? We want to know why you wanted to make this video." And the video is again about the Holocaust survivors, and the Holocaust is real. And I said this real simple. I said, you know what? Why do I make this? I said, I believe, like I already mentioned, the Old Testament is Jewish, New Testament is Jewish, and I talked to them my biblical belief about God's covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the Jews, and the land covenant, Messianic covenant, and so forth. And I said, you know what? I said the difference between me and you guys is I believe Jesus is the Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach. He came the first time, and he's coming again, and I'm excited about it. And then I said this. I only had a few minutes to share, but I said this. I said, this is fascinating to me. I said, you know, as often as I go to Israel, I love going to places like the Pool of Siloam, Shiloach. It's being more and more of it's being excavated right now, as we speak. Right now, it's going on. That's being excavated. This is remarkable because the Pool of Siloam is where the Jews, when they would make their way to Jerusalem for the feast days, say Passover or the fall feast, whichever, spring or fall feast, they make their way to the Pool of Siloam. They would wash in the Pool of Siloam, and then they would start the processional road up to the temple. Folks, listen, that processional road has been discovered. The Pool of Siloam, the latest excavation just began, I think, back in April of this year. And we're watching these things. This is phenomenal. And I said, you know, we're watching the Pool of Siloam being excavated. We're watching it's already been excavated, the processional road, about ready to be opened up to the public from the Pool of Siloam up to the temple area. And then I said, over in Shiloh right now, they've discovered, the archaeologists have discovered where the tabernacle was. They know where they found it, where the Holy of Holies was in Shiloh. And I said, this to me, you guys, I said, and these are all non-believing Jews, right? And they weren't against me. They wanted to know what made me tick. And it was great. I had a great time, really loved it. And I said, for me, this is just evidence that everything is being prepared for the Messiah to return. And I talked about other things all converging at the same time. Of course, they said, well, we'll see if he's going to return or if he's coming for the first time. But one of the rabbis said, so you believe we are in the Messianic era? I said, I do believe we are in the Messianic era. And he said, you know what? I think we are in the Messianic era. Folks, Jesus is coming. Okay, now with archaeology, think of this. Everything's coming together. Everything's coming together. Check this out. in I think it was 1999. I'm pretty sure it was 1999. Some of you guys will correct me if I got this wrong. But I think it was 1999 where there's this Muslim group that dug underneath the Temple Mount. You have the Al-Aqsa Mosque up there. They dug underneath the Temple Mount. You also have the Gold Dome of the Rock. And they removed, get this, 9,000 tons of dirt and debris. The purpose of it, the reason why this Muslim group had done this, 9,000 tons, that is a lot. They did it in order to remove, they wanted to get rid of any evidence of the history of Jews having the city of Jerusalem, like coins from the first century, that kind of thing. So cool, all right? So what they did is they take out, why did I say it's cool? Because this is why. So they take out 9,000 tons of dirt and debris with the intent to remove all evidence. They took that dirt and debris, they dumped it all in the Kidron Valley. The Kidron Valley runs between Mount of Olives and the Temple Mount, so right down there, right? They dumped 9,000 tons of dirt and debris in the Kidron Valley. What happened? These two amateur archaeologists, they were studying archaeology, witnessed it, and they came up with an idea. Hey, this Muslim group, they did all the heavy lifting for us. They took all the dirt and debris, they dumped it in the area of the Kidron Valley. Let's start sifting through it. They did. They started the Temple Sifting Project. And what happened was, instead of the Muslims removing any evidence of the Jews having Jerusalem, they did all of the heavy lifting, so it would be easy to prove, because all the dirt was removed, then they sifted it, all of the evidence that the Jews had Jerusalem. They did it for them. That is so cool. Think of this, in Psalm 102, which I believe is a fulfillment that's going to be absolutely fulfilled in the Messianic kingdom, but it's starting to happen right now. It's going to be fulfilled in the millennial kingdom when Jesus returns, but it's starting to happen now. Check this out, in Psalm 102, the Bible says, "But you, O Lord, shall endure forever, and the remembrance of your name to all generations. You will arise and have mercy on Zion, for the time to favor her, yes, the set time has come." That's talking about when Jesus comes back. The time to favor her has come. "For your servants take pleasure in her stones, and show favor to her dust. So the nations shall fear the name of the Lord, and all the kings of the earth your glory. For the Lord shall build up Zion, and he shall appear in glory." Check it out again, verse 14, Psalm 102. "Your servants take pleasure in her stones, and show favor into her dust," or delight in her dirt. Man, that is just so awesome. When you look at that and you go, that's what's happening right now. The pool of Siloam, delighting in the dirt. The processional road, the tabernacle in Shiloh. I mean, you look at all of these things and you think, man, this is just, I don't know. For me, it's just, I mean, you look at everything coming together right now, including archaeology. And I'm going to get to the Saudi peace plan here in just a minute. I know I've been going already like 45 minutes or something. Just give me just a few more minutes, because there's so many things that are happening right now. But I want to thank you guys, listen, for just any support, your prayer support, any financial support. I just want to thank you guys for supporting us. You can visit, if you want to, you can visit hopeforourtimes.com, click on the Give tab, and by partnering with us, you help us to point people to the hope of Jesus Christ. He's coming again, and he came the first time that we would be forgiven of our sins. But really, I seriously just want to thank you guys, because we can't do it without you. But your prayers are badly needed, and any other support you guys have is just really, really appreciated. Thank you guys. Okay, now I look back at this and think, okay, we have this in Psalm 102. What do we have? Red heifers. We have the talk of the temple. And I'm not saying the red heifers are going to all be it, all right? So don't misunderstand me. I'm just saying how everything is coming together. And again, some of these things trouble me because I know there's going to be some very painful things that are coming. But I got to look past that to what they point to. Jesus is coming in the millennial kingdom. Do you realize we're going to see Jesus in Jerusalem? We're going to be with him. This is, to me, is amazing. So you have this. You have the archaeology. We have the Temple Institute building all of their items. We know about all those things. We have the Messianic Jews. The persecution is increasing against them. We have the threat of Iran. I'm going to get to the peace plan in just a minute. We have this major threat that's constantly coming out of Iran. What is going to happen? All right, in Isaiah, check this out. I won't read it for sake of time, but in Isaiah chapter, maybe I will. Isaiah chapter 17, Bible says this. A couple things here from Isaiah I want to show you. In Isaiah chapter 17, the Bible says this, the burden against Damascus. Behold, Damascus shall cease from being a city, and it shall be a ruinous heap. And the cities of error are forsaken. They will be for flocks which lie down, and no one will make them afraid. The fortress will also cease from Ephraim, that's the northern kingdom of Israel, the kingdom from Damascus, and the remnant of Syria. All right, so it begins here in Isaiah chapter 17, verse 1. Behold, Damascus will cease from being a city. It will be a ruinous heap. Verse 12, you drop down there. Woe to the multitude of many people who make a noise like the roar of the seas, and to the rushing of nations that make rushing like the rushing of mighty waters. The nations will rush like the rushing of many waters, but God will rebuke them, and they will flee away, be chased like chaff on the mountains before the wind, like a rolling before the whirlwind. Then behold, at eventide, in other words, in the evening, there is trouble. And before the morning, he is no more. Who's he? Speaking of Damascus. So in the evening, there's trouble coming to Damascus. Before morning, Damascus is no more. This is the portion of those who plunder Israel and of those who rob us. Very fascinating when you look at that. This is what's going to happen, right? Damascus, Isaiah chapter 17, I believe is prophecy. It's going to be fulfilled in the future. Damascus is going to be destroyed in the night. In the evening there, so it's evening over in Israel. Where I live in California, we're different by about 10 hours. So, but the day is coming for those who wake up in that part of the world. They're going to wake up in the morning and Damascus is gone. What's Damascus? Damascus is like this massive warehouse supporting all of these different terrorist organizations. You have the Iran. You have the meetings of leaders that sneakily gather. You have the massive threats that come out of Syria. You have, if Bill Salas is right, you have the Psalm 83 wars. You have Psalm 83, Jeremiah chapter 49, Isaiah chapter 17. I look and think if Bill is correct, all those are going to happen pretty much at the same time. And also, when you look at it, with Isaiah chapter 17, the destruction of Damascus, Israel at that time takes kind of a heavy hit. Jeremiah chapter 49 talks about Iran taking a serious hit from Israel during that time. And the Psalm 83 nations, you look, you go, wow, interesting. Will it be something like that, a destruction, according to those three passages, that brings Israel to the negotiating table for peace? Could very well be. I believe that will happen prior to the Ezekiel chapter 38 war. It may be at a time, listen, when Ezekiel chapter 38 happens, it has to happen at a time when Israel has basically thought, okay, I'm dwelling in peace and safety. Hence, I think my friend Bill may be right. So in Ezekiel chapter 38, you've heard me mention this before, you have twice it says they're dwelling in safety. Once it says peace and safety. Right? So safety it implies, you can look it up yourself in the Hebrew, if you have a Hebrew dictionary, and you find out it could apply to the Israeli Defense Force, giving Israel its safety. Hence, when you arrive in a place like Tel Aviv at the Ben Gurion Airport, you immediately sense, man, you're in a very safe place. You can feel it, safety. So, but the term peace in Ezekiel chapter 38, where they're dwelling in peace and dwelling safety or in safe or safely, the term peace comes from a Hebrew word that literally means tranquility. Israel's not tranquil. No matter how safe they may be because of their military, they're not tranquil. No way are they tranquil. Constant threats from Iran, constant threats from Hezbollah and Hamas and the Islamic Jihad, threats from the inside, as it was in the days of Nehemiah, threats from the outside. So they're not in a tranquil place. But something's got to give that sets up for the Ezekiel chapter 38 battle that brings Israel into a tranquil place. Could be Isaiah 17, Psalm 83, Jeremiah chapter 49. That causes Israel to go, now we're dwelling good. It's not until then that the thought comes into the leader of the Magog invasion, Gog, that comes to his mind, the hooks in the jaw to bring him down against the nation of Israel, descending like a cloud, but also troops on the ground, horse and buckler. You have a picture of both of those things, but it's God that wipes them out, Ezekiel chapter 39. But I look at this and I think, friends, as you watch the threat of nuclear weapons from Iran coming, how much longer is Israel going to be able to wait before they've got to do something? Listen, it could be this week. It could be tomorrow. It could be the next day. I don't know. What we can tell, there's certain identifiers that we know they're last days events. Do they happen during the tribulation, or will they happen just before the tribulation? We don't know for sure. One example would be, and we do know Ezekiel chapter 38, it's in the latter times. It's in the latter days. So we know that, right? We can tell. Does it mean before the tribulation or after or at the start of the tribulation? Before the rapture, I should say, or after, right? When you look at 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1, we have an identifier. Paul writes in there, in the latter times, what's going to happen? There will be doctrines of demons, deceiving spirits, commanding that you don't marry, forbidding that you eat meat. So we can tell just by those things alone, doctrine of demons, deceiving spirits, in the church, transgenderism stuff being taught by pastors. You look at that and you go, wow. And then you have commanding that you don't eat meat. Folks, we're already hearing that. They're already telling us that. You're not going to be able to do these things. So we can tell the season that we live in. So going all the way back to the beginning, what do we have? One more I'm going to get to Saudi Arabia in just a second. So you go back to what we said in the very beginning. What happened? In the first 69 weeks, 483 years, the religious leaders who knew the Bible would have known if they were not choosing to be ignorant of the Messiah coming. They would have known it's the coming of the Messiah because they could time it from Nehemiah building the wall up until the Messiah is going to be cut off, 483 years. They should have known. Folks, it comes to the second coming of Christ. We can see all these identifiers taking place at the same time. I'm not one that's going to predict the rapture. I'm not going to predict when the confirmation of the covenant is going to be. I'm not going to do any of that stuff. But I will say, folks, every single thing looks like it's coming together in our day. But I do believe, as Patrick Wood said when he was on my program, how much time do you think Satan, through his man Antichrist, when he knows, Revelation chapter 12, he has but little time. How much time will Satan use to build the infrastructure when he knows he has little time? Patrick Wood said 0. He's not going to waste 1 second. So what we are experiencing is the infrastructure being built for the beast system. That's what we are experiencing. All the stuff going on at the same time. We're in this thing. It's all racing forward. We're experiencing it. But Satan isn't going to waste 1 second building infrastructure. He knows he has little time. It has to be built before his man Antichrist steps on the scene. Hence, we are experiencing these things we are experiencing. All right, with that, Saudi Arabia, what's going on? In Israel, what's going on? Very interesting. Now, some people are saying, hey, the SDG meeting, the Sustainable Development Goals, the Agenda 2030 thing is a covenant with many, or proposing it. Some people are saying it might be. Listen, folks, I do not believe it is. I think Daniel chapter 9 is very specific. It's your people, your holy city. It's about Israel. The first 483 years, first 69 weeks were the last week. The last 7 years are. In fact, what do you have in the whole thing in the 70th week? It focuses on the sacrifices and the offerings. So we know there's going to be a temple. In fact, in Isaiah chapter 2, verse 2, there's a temple of the Lord that's going to be above all the other mountains. I believe that's the millennial temple. Same with Micah chapter 4, verse 1. There's going to be that temple. But before that, we know that Jesus talks about the abomination of desolation in the holy place. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. What do you have? He's going to demand to be worshipped as God. He's going to claim that he is God. Antichrist is. In the temple of God, it says. So you have these things. So we know all of these things are coming. Hence, there must be a covenant with many. So we're watching the development, and it's about Israel. I don't believe it's about the Agenda 2030. Agenda 2030, I think, is exceptionally instrumental. It's being used to build the beast system. Climate laws are going to get worse for you than COVID laws were. But Agenda 2030, everything in it, it's like, let's build the system of the beast. That's what we see happening with that. But the covenant of Daniel 9 is different. Isaiah chapter 28 says this. You think of Daniel chapter 9, all right, the covenant of many, with many. Isaiah chapter 28. Therefore, hear the word of the Lord, you scornful men who rule this people who are in Jerusalem. This is a prophecy, I believe, of the last days when bad men are leading Jerusalem. Scornful men. Because you have said we made a covenant with death, Isaiah 28, verse 15, and with Sheol we are in agreement. When the overflowing scourge passes through, it will not come upon us. Wait a minute. So there's wicked rulers in Jerusalem. They know they're entering into a covenant with the devil, but they're saying, we're going to avoid the scourge coming to us. War, maybe? Doesn't say what the scourge is. We're going to avoid this if we enter into this agreement, even though we know it's an agreement with the devil. If you saw my update from this just the other day, I talked about Henry Spock, who back over 60 years ago, he said, give us, it was an exact quote from him, give us a man, any man. The world is void of leaders 60 years ago. How much more we're void now? Give us a man, any man. We don't care if he's a god or the devil, but that's the man we want, the devil. Wow. What's happening here in Isaiah chapter 28? We'll make a covenant even with death, even with the devil, to avoid the scourge, even though we know it. We want to avoid something, an overflowing scourge. They say, we made a covenant so the scourge won't harm us. We've made lies our refuge. Under falsehood, we have hidden ourselves. They know it's a lie, the covenant they enter into. Verse 18, your covenant, God says, your covenant with death will be annulled. What happens in Daniel's covenant, Daniel chapter 9? I believe it's the same covenant, Isaiah 28, Daniel 9. At the midpoint of the tribulation, you saw it, Antichrist brings an end to sacrifice and offering, right? There's a covenant with many. It's got to have Jerusalem at the center and the sacrifice and offering. It's a covenant with many, maybe with the UN, no, right? But the covenant with death will be annulled. Your agreement with Sheol will not stand. When the overflowing scourge passes through, then you will be trampled down by it. It will be a terror just to understand the report. What did Jesus say in Matthew chapter 24? He said, when you see the abomination of desolation, flee, get out of here. This is Isaiah 28, Daniel chapter 9, Matthew chapter 24, the Olivet Discourse. You start seeing all of these things come together. Folks, let's just put it all together. You have red heifers. Again, I'm not saying they could all get white blemishes, right? I followed red heifers back in the 1990s, the early 2000s, and so forth. I get that. But what I'm talking about here is don't miss how everything is converging right now. That people wanting to build the temple, the gold dome's a problem. Somehow that problem's going to be resolved. Then you have the Saudi agreement, and right now people are excited. We have the Abraham Accords that opened up the pathway for that Saudi agreement. Very interesting, isn't it? So you have Saudi Arabia. We're going to have a peace agreement with Israel. What are we going to do with the Palestinian problem? Folks, all of this is coming to a head. And I'm not saying that this is the covenant of many, the Saudi agreement, but I do find all of these things so fascinating as all of them are happening at the same time. So you look at that, you look at the agreement, you look at Israel saying, maybe we can finally have peace. Folks, it's like you can't make this stuff up. You add to that what's going on with the Messianic Jews. You have the threats from Iran. We know that Russia's going to have hooks and jaws, turn them back around. You have Isaiah chapter 17. We have everything it's like on the table. And I want to encourage you, say, how much longer are we going to be here? I don't know. You hear me say it all the time. I do believe we're watching, we are in it, the experience of the beast system being built. But with that, don't be discouraged. You lift up your head because your redemption draws near. And we press forward. And we recognize that God is doing great things. We look past the pain and we look to Jesus coming again. Listen, tomorrow, Maria Z is going to be joining me live. Tuesday, Monkey's going to be joining me live. I hope you can join me for both of those programs. They're going to be great. I went a little bit over time. God bless you guys. See you tomorrow.